There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that often lift and separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we would like to welcome you. David and I are old friends. We have been talking horror and science fiction movies for so many decades that we might get confused for vampires. But those of you coming back already know that. We have so much nerdy knowledge in our head that we can't contain it anymore. We just have to shove it on to anybody out there that will listen to us. Mm-hmm. And we've been for a long time, and now we're doing it even globally.
Yeah.
I am here right now with my good friend David and co-host, that is, David Horton. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. That was great. Normally we start with what have you done this week in your genre week? And I have the distinct, awesome, incredible, amazing privilege of finally finishing Fallout. I told you that I'd started, I think, our first episode this season, I think. But work, life, everything else, plus the fact that I prefer if it's a big, huge topic like this, I don't like to binge it. I like to wait at least a couple of days in between the episodes, which it worked for this. And I really wish, it would be my big suggestion to Prime, that for season 2 of Fallout, which has already been commissioned and greenlit, that they release it one episode a week. That'd be fine. You don't have to dump your entire series at one time, in my opinion. Anyway, I was excited about it to begin with. I was excited the last time we talked about it. The excitement has not stopped and did not stop during each episode. I was excited about it because I do love the game series. It's based on the game series called Fallout, which is basically a techno-punk 50s noirish future look at a wasteland. It's post-apocalyptic. You would love it. The survival after nuclear bombs have dropped. And these people have been protected in silos, and now they come out of the silos, and what world do they find? And each game is like a different major U.S. city that's reminiscent of it. The first 2 games were set in the San Francisco, Los Angeles area. Then they had Fallout New Vegas, which was obviously set in Vegas. They had Fallout 4, which was set near Boston and Providence and up in New England and all of that. So they're always incredibly good stories for the games and well told. And this is Jonah Nolan and Lisa Joy, and they took over for it, and they did the same thing for this that they did for Westworld. They just reinvented this genre in a new storytelling way, and it was great. It was so good.
And now they're going to leave, and the rest of the series will suck.
Will suck. Yeah, just like Westworld. No. Cast was great. The production design was great. Everything was great. I think I mentioned before, because you knew Goggins, Walton Goggins.
Yeah, he was on that Justified show.
He basically plays the bad guy. He plays a character called the Ghoul. You would like him. He's great. But the lead is Ella Purnell. She is amazing in it. Aaron Moten is in it, and a very unique character. One thing I think you will like about it, because you've mentioned it when we've done post-apocalyptic things, is the game is almost like a role-play game. It's a first-person game, but you basically make decisions all the way through it that then affects the outcome. I think Fallout 4 even had like 16 different endings you could get to the game, depending on choices you made as the game progressed. And a lot of those decisions are morally based. So what was very interesting about the series was that was the core thread underneath all of the narrative. was where are your morals and how are your morals affected by the destruction of the world around you? And does that make you an immoral person because you do what you have to do to survive sometimes or not? Like we talked about when we did The Road, about the father was making decisions to stay alive. And sometimes those weren't always the nicest, heroic, best decision.
Hmm. Like shooting
But
someone with a flare gun.
yeah, but you have to do that to survive. This is like that with all of the characters, all the major characters, and how they're effective and what is their morality play. Really good. It is amazingly good. I was really happy with it. And I think you would like it too. I really do think you would like the post-apocalyptic feel of it. It's like, what if you had 1950s, except everybody had perfected little baby minor nuclear reactors. So your entire home, your car, your robot that you have is powered by a little nuclear reactor. And that's the aesthetic that it goes into. So then the bombs drop, and now suddenly you come out of these fallout shelters, but everything still has this like 50s aesthetic to it. It's a really cool design. Really, really great series. Loved it. Sorry.
Awesome.
What'd you
I'm
do?
glad that you had a very pleasurable genre week experience. That's a rarity.
I did. Sometimes I go, I didn't have time to do nothing. So that was good. Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of times I have time to do it. I just end up seeing something I don't like. And in this case, I saw something that I did like. I actually revisited something that I watched last year, and it's a little British movie called In Fear.
In Fear. Okay.
Yeah, terrible title. You know how I am about this. Terrible titles out there abound, and this one is no good either. But the movie's good. It's a really tense UK thriller that reminds me a lot of that movie, The Hitcher, with Rutger Hauer.
Oh, really? I love that.
Yeah.
Except it looks like your poster looks like it stars Jennifer Lawrence.
It does look like Jennifer Lawrence. That's not her. It's a small story, very small cast. It was directed by a guy named Jeremy Lovering. He's a British television director that I've never heard of, but the cast is great. It stars Lane de Caystecker. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that last name right, but he was on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
And okay. Alice Englert is the girl that you thought was Jennifer Lawrence. But then the one familiar face that I knew was Alan Leach, who played Tom, the chauffeur in Downton Abbey, as well as he's in Bohemian Rhapsody, too.
Good actor.
Yeah, he is. He's a great actor. And in this, he is the Hitcher type character. So it's really cool to see such a friendly, nice typecast flip and be the bad guy. So that was fun. A synopsis is Tom and Lucy are both happy young adults eager to set out on their first weekend getaway as a couple. They're in rural Ireland. They set off for a planned trip to stay at a remote hotel, but quickly find themselves in a maze of old back roads. They soon discover that they are at the mercies of an unknown tormentor that is eager to take advantage of their vulnerability and their distance from civilization. Yeah. Yeah, it gets 81% on Rotten Tomatoes with 70 reviews, and I would say that's a very fair rating. This movie keeps your attention. It stresses you out. It is very intense. So that is what I did for my genre week. I did a little UK film. So
wow. A little UK film gives me nowhere to go.
Yeah, there is no segue from rural Ireland and 50s post-apocalyptic, really. Actually, you can go 50s sci-fi.
50s sci-fi, yeah. Although, yeah, I guess you could. We are.
It is literally 50s sci-fi.
It is, but, well, yeah. It is. Those of you who are joining us now know what we're doing. Hopefully you found it through that. But if not, and you don't know, we are going to jump into a film that has been on my list probably since we first started talking about doing the podcast, just because I remembered it so vividly as a kid, watching it on Shock Theater and everything else. And it's called The Monolith Monsters. It came out in 1957. Directed by John Sherwood, It was written by Norman Jolly, who basically, if you look him up, he's basically a TV hack. He did a lot of Barnaby Jones and stuff, a lot of TV writing. But Robert Fresco, who also is credited with doing Tarantula, another movie on our list, but a story from Jack Arnold, the Jack Arnold director, an incredible director that we like.
And Sherwood also did the second sequel to Creature. He did Creature Walks Among Us.
Correct.
So there's a Jack Arnold connection too.
Another Jack Arnold connection. But it like I said, it came out in 1957. I guess I could do a little bit of synopsis of it because it's a unique story. Rocks from a meteor, which grow when in contact with water, threaten a sleepy Southwest desert community. That's the one sentence IMDb description of the Monolith Monsters. It did have familiar faces in it: Grant Williams, Lola Albright, Les Tremayne, a lot of people you recognize from other, especially 50s and early 60s films and television. Had you seen this movie before?
I had never seen this movie before.
Well, then I am so curious about your take on Monolith Monsters.
I just realized I had not reconciled all my notes. I'm pulling up my email because I had emailed myself some stuff. I actually, the first time I watched it, I was bored. I was like, this is stupid. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, you know what? This is actually pretty good because no one was doing this eco-terrorism or eco-horror back in that day, especially in the 50s. Not that I recall, unless you have a key that I don't know of. And it's a very unique movie. As far as my impression, I mean, I enjoyed it. And I think that had I watched it as a kid, I would have loved it because it is so unique. It's like a movie like Gargoyles or one of those that's set out in the desert. Instead of having humanist or humanoid monsters, you've got a monster that's not even really a villain. It's just a natural thing that's growing.
That's the thing that I think is a unique, but also part of the, as an older viewer watching it, the boredom factor of it is it's basically a natural phenomenon. You're afraid of a natural phenomenon. But Twister was the same way, and they created action and suspense out of that.
I had that as a key. That's hilarious that you said that.
Yeah, but yeah, crystals as menace sort of thing. So yeah, I'm the same way. Watching it again, I was bored a little bit just because I was going, what did I like about this other than like the first murder where the guy turns into a rock? That's not murder, the first death, I guess. And
that one dude just pushes him over. I mean, he lets him fall. He doesn't even try to catch him.
Yeah. And Grant Williams, I've always liked him as an actor. I think he was a really good character actor at the time. I liked him from Incredible Shrinking Man.
Well, I was to say, he's great in that, and it's the very same year. He did both these movies back to back.
Yeah. But Les Tremayne is a great actor who I think, if I remember correctly, actually came from radio. So he's the newspaper reporter character. But anyway, you'll get into cast when we get into it. I thought the overview of it was, again, slow paced, especially near the middle. And there's like, okay, so we're trying to save the town, really? And seems like an awfully small town to me. Is it smaller than Mayberry? Is this a big deal? Really?
Well, it's because they're using old buildings that they can destroy.
Yeah.
Little buildings. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that I think he let the bag out too soon about the growth, because they spend time in scene after scene after scene trying to figure out what makes the rocks move. And we already know it's water. We know water from the very first opening teaser scene. It's just freaking water, dude. Okay, water. Go try water. Why don't you try, And it just gets frustrating a little bit in the science.
Well, I think it's cool, though, that they're black, shiny rocks, and they're just lying around everywhere. So you naturally would pick one up because it looks cool. And it just so happens that little girl on a school field trip takes one home, and her mother won't let her take it inside, makes her wash her hands, and she ends up washing the rock essentially by throwing it into the water so that maybe she can take it inside, I guess, or she drops it in there, whatever. And then it just, next thing you know, man, the house is obliterated. The parents are dead, and the little girl is the only survivor.
Which is another thing that bothered me this time from the adult watching it perspective of, okay, so if you touch the rock, you'll start to turn to stone.
Right.
Or if you touch the rock in water, you'll try to. I don't understand how the disease is spread if you're just touching the rock, because
No, and
everybody
there's one
touches the rock.
point where what cracks me up is that the district office of the Department of Interior is right next door to the newspaper in Maybury.
Every small town has a Department of the
A
Interior
Department
right
of
there on Main
Interior.
Street.
And not only do they have that, they have a geologist working there. And
Two geologists.
with
Yeah.
like a whole lab set up. But back to what you were saying, there's a scene where he's working with it, or it's in the sink and gets the water on it or whatever, and you can see he's just breathing that fume, and I'm like, is he going to turn into a rock? Because he's breathing that shit.
Yeah, I couldn't understand the contagion. But again, I thought it for 57, this whole year of like them and Incredible Shrinking Man and all the good sci-fi horror, Tarantula, all that came out around then, this did keep that kind of pace and stuff up. A little girl in danger. Can we save her life? Oh no, now the town's in danger. What do we do?
Right.
Sort of
Right.
thing. So
Totally get it. I have some watch notes, but I also have one note that we mentioned way back, and it may even be the same year. I can't remember if Deadly Mantis was in 57 too. I think it may have been.
Yeah, pretty sure.
And I mentioned, I believe, during that podcast that Henry Mancini was uncredited for the music.
Mm-hmm.
And Henry Mancini, for those of you that don't know, is a big composer, especially in the 60s. He did the Baby Elephant Walk. He did the Pink Panther, a lot of familiar music. But what I discovered with a little more research is that he worked with an orchestra that did stock music. So that's why he's uncredited for these films, including this film, Monolith Monsters, and Revenge of the Creature, the sequel to Creature from the Black Lagoon. And Deadly Mantis. So I thought it was interesting that Henry Mancini is attached to these projects.
Yeah, and that makes sense too, because this music, the theme to the two different sub-themes in this music, I've got it in my notes, are from Creature from the Black Lagoon. That dun dun dun.
Okay, I was going to say the transitions crack me up because it'll be like flowy, dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
It's just like really fast and abrupt.
And they overuse it a lot to create tension. I mean, whether they're in a car driving at night or he just cracked that crystal and it ran into the sink. It's dun 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 dun. Okay, we got it.
Yeah, it's great.
I got in my notes, Universal loved its monsters, even if they were rocks.
Immobile rocks. That's another problem I have with this is I was bitching earlier about In Fear being a terrible title for a movie. Monolith Monsters is a terrible title for a movie.
Yes.
I mean, they should have called it the Medusa Monsters, if anything, because it's turning people into stone.
One of my keys, totally. That's exactly what I thought it should be. It should be, or call it the Medusans or the Medusa Syndrome or something.
Yeah, give it more of a sci-fi sounding and less of a 50s monster sounding, because it is more sci-fi than it is monster movie.
I understand their dilemma because it's hard to get the suspense up when it's like, the rocks are coming. They'll be here in 4 days.
It is funny because you think rocks being immobile, so they're not very threatening.
They're going to come right down this gorge, right into town. When?
Do you think
now.
they had like a meeting, a story meeting, where they said, okay, let's have them grow tall and fall over so they'll be more threatening?
Oh, I think so, yeah. Rather than it just being like crystals on the ground growing, I definitely think they came up with the idea of falling and crumbling, which now mutates it into more, and each one grows and blah, 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 all that. It's just that I think they needed more of the contagion feel for more panic. And I think they needed a different way to sell the ending, because the ending was all water makes them grow. Salt water makes them stop growing. It's like, okay. Don't know if that was it. I would much rather it be rays from the sun eventually stop them, almost like War of the Worlds as bacteria or the virus destroys them.
I think that the miniature artist was so good that they just went to
Mm-hmm.
him and said, "Why don't you help us with an ending?" He's like, "What if we blow up a dam and flood them?"
Yep.
And that's exactly what they do. They flood the salt flats and it turns to salt water and kills them. But it is, I mean, all the miniature work's really cool. I mean, really
Yep.
cool in this.
Do you know why?
No, I don't think so.
Done by a guy, I forgot his first name, but his last name is Stein. And he started as a special effects artist on King Kong and worked from then. So he's had
Wow.
over 20 years of special effects work by this. And he's the one that came up with, because the monolith monsters themselves are actually created out of balsa wood. And they're pre-scored, so they know exactly where they'll chip and fall and break, and that way they could do the slow motion camera shots and everything, which
Ah,
is really
okay.
cool.
It's very
Yeah,
cool.
I love that was one of the kid in me moments. Is I like the miniatures a lot, destroying the mill and the dam blowing up. Yeah, miniatures. Yeah. So
Wow. So I guess we could move on to cast.
yeah.
Because that's actually what I'm cutting and pasting from my email right now because I left two out. Well, you mentioned that Grant Williams is. I don't have a lot of information on these people, but they are very familiar faces. Grant Williams, we just covered, I think last year. Yeah, it was during the Matheson
Shrinking
run.
Man.
Yeah, Incredible Shrinking Man. I recently caught him in Written on the Wind, which is Douglas Sirk melodrama I happened to catch. And it came out at almost the same time too. And I was like, he went from doing like crazy B sci-fi movies to doing like Rock Hudson, Ava Gardner movies or what. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember if Ava Gardner's in that. Anyway, so I thought that was interesting. Lola Albright, I did not really recognize. She played Kathy, his
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend. Do you know her from anything?
No, there was something about her. I didn't let me check my notes because I looked it up because she was a Western girl. She did a bunch of
Okay.
like Western stuff. I was trying to remember what I put her under
Well, and this
or
looks
where I'd
like a
seen her.
Western,
Yeah,
kind of,
it's a very Western feel to it
because
in
it's in the
the
desert. Yeah.
yeah.
It's not, I mean,
Uh,
they drive cars and they're regulars. I mean, they're not horse people, but yeah, it does look like Western settings, I guess you would say.
I mean,
Les
she did a
Tremaine, uh,
bunch of movies, but she was normally not the principal, if that makes
right.
sense. So,
Les Tremaine played Martin Cochran. You mentioned him. I remember him from War of the Worlds, of course. He played Major General Mann. He's a very familiar face. Some of these other people are familiar faces. I just don't really know them that well. That Richard Cutting played Dr. Reynolds.
yep.
He looks very familiar to me. But then I had not gone too deep into the cast, but as I was watching it, William Shallert makes an appearance in it. He's uncredited, but he's the
Yeah.
weatherman that they contact because they're worried about the rain.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah,
He's
and
so
William
good.
Shallert, we just recently talked about on a Star Trek episode because he did The Trouble with Tribbles. But I mean, he
Yep.
was a character actor in everything. I mean, he was even in Twilight Zone, the movie back in the 80s. Very familiar face.
And I love
And
the fact that he goes into all the meteorological technobabble and
they're
Grant's
like,
character is like, God, just tell me, is it going to rain or not?
right. He's like milking it, and he's not
Yeah.
even credited in the credits. I mean,
No.
that's funny. And another famous person that was not credited is Troy Donahue, plays Hank
Yep.
Johnson. And I was like, what? Why are they? I
Yep.
mean, and then I guess they just weren't known well then.
Or they just did it as a one-off, day player at the studio. So you come in and just play a background character or a one note.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if
Uh,
Troy was more of the 60s than the 50s or not.
this end of the 50s was essentially the studio system trying its last gasp before all the auteurs came about in the 60s and 70s. My big one uncredited is Paul Frees. I recognized it from the very opening narration about meteorology in space. That's the narrator from War of the Worlds.
Okay.
Same guy.
Makes
And
sense.
he has, if you look him up on IMDb, he's probably got 300 credits. He's done so much voice work in cartoons and narrations and movies and everything. He's a great voice. But
Okay.
yeah, Paul Frees. Yeah.
That is pretty much what I have for the cast. This movie has no awards and is not on the list of movies you must see before you die.
No.
I mean, and then back in the 50s, sci-fi and horror movies weren't getting awards. So if a movie like this did get awards, it would be a re-release like for DVD or something. So yeah, there's nothing out. I've got other little notes about it before we get the keys. One of my favorite lines was, "How's the Simpson kid? She's alive." That's about all.
Yeah. I've got some dialogue scenes too, but kids nowadays won't do anything unless they're getting paid. It's, nothing's changed.
No.
I've got some watch notes that are funny too. Like, man, they overplay that theme. Oh, I was going, what if the same guy that did the trailer for, what did we do? Robinson Crusoe on Mars? What if the same guy did the trailer for this and had lines like, "The horrible terror of slowly growing rocks"?
That sounds like a Wendell Thompson trailer to me.
It does.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
I've got
That it's the only monster to be a purely chemical, the only movie monster to be a purely chemical process.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a key that I'll bring up later on from Next Gen that's similar, but yeah, I think it's the only movie monster that's a chemical process.
From Next Gen, is that what you said?
Yeah, from Star Trek Next Generation.
Oh, you're talking about from like a key? Okay.
Yeah, I've got in my watch notes because, as a geologist, I know precisely where to place these charges to blow up the dam because they do it in literally like 30 minutes. And he's telling them, put this one here, this one here, this one here. I'm going, why are you telling them anything? Why? At least the sheriff should be doing it. Somebody else.
You would think.
But I guess he's the hero.
Why is the music suspenseful when he's drinking water? There's one point where he drinks a glass of water and it goes, da, da, da. I was like, are they trying to do a subtle, and I mean subtle in quotation marks, hint that we, the audience, know the water is what the problem is? It was just very strange. Yeah. Very, very strange.
I've got, if this is the contagion, why do they keep touching the rocks? Because everybody's picking them up and they're chipping them and they're touching them.
The minute people are turning to stone, you would not see me get near that stuff.
Nope. Not without gloves or something. Pick it up different.
I've got, why does the Department of Interior, would they really have all this chemistry stuff?
Well, I guess if they're geologists, but...
So strange. Very, very strange.
That would have been another thing too, maybe in exposition to explain. We're here because of this node of something, some crystal or something that we really like, and we're here to study it. We've been, here for a month now, or whatever.
That's really all I have other than keys.
Okay, we can go to keys.
We can move on to keys. The first one I have, you're going to laugh. You probably have it too, but magic rocks.
I did not have it. I did not. But now I just thought of it. Those crystals you used to play with.
You used to put them in the water, like in a fish aquarium, and they grow. They were brightly colored. Huh?
That is so true. I forgot totally that one. That's a great one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing that came to mind. I was like, these rocks are growing. They're magic rocks.
Yep.
Except they're black. They're not colorful.
True. So, I do like the rocks. I always wanted one, even as a kid. They look like like obsidian.
They look like onyx, but when I look at them now, have you ever driven by like a road that's being paved and they have like chipped tar in a pile? That's what it looks like to me, that black, shiny, like tar rock.
Yep.
Or whatever.
And I have a key from that because in Game of Thrones, the thing that destroys the bad guys, the mystical bad guys, is called Dragonstone. and it's supposedly rock that has been heated by dragon's breath, and it makes this black, shiny glass-like stone that then you can use to make swords or to make spearheads, arrowheads, all that kind of stuff.
And
It's
that's
called
Game of
Dragonstone.
Thrones.
Yep.
What else do I have? I have the Andromeda strain.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a monster movie, but it is a science fiction movie, and it is about an organism that comes from outer space, which is basically what Andromeda strain is. It's just instead of a communicable disease, it's rock people.
Yep. Not people, just rocks.
Well,
Just
they're rocks, but they turn you into rock people. And the people in Andromeda strain were dying from the bug or whatever that came from outer space.
Right. Actually, and I've got that listed on mine as a non-traditional extraterrestrial threat, like Andromeda strain. And the one I have is the Annihilation. The movie, I think Winona Ryder's in it. No,
it's the girl Natalie Portman. I haven't seen it.
Natalie Portman. Yeah, and it's good, but it's the same thing. This weird area develops. It's extraterrestrial. We don't know what it means. We have to go investigate, and it's slowly growing and going to engulf the base.
Rotten Tomatoes constantly tells me I need to watch Annihilation, and I haven't. But it always gets a good score. It's like 80, I think, on there.
It's very. I think you would see the similarities in the keys immediately to this. I think you would like it, but it also is the same thing. If you're touched by this void, you run the risk of going insane. Is what happens to these characters, as opposed to turn to stone. I've also got on mine Medusa. We said it already, but that's the whole thing. If you see her, you turn to stone, kind of deal.
Right. It's the whole mythology aspect of it. I have. You mentioned Twister. And I put down Twister, and I was like, what other Geo movies were out there? And the only one I could think of was that Day After Tomorrow with Jake Gyllenhaal.
I think the other one was, 2012 or something like that? That was also that whole coming second ice age movie.
Right. I mean, it's not necessarily caused from something landing on the planet, though, is it? Or maybe it is. Maybe it was we were hit by a meteorite or something. I can't remember. I haven't seen that movie in a long time.
Right.
But something makes the Earth's weather start changing, and it's very similar here, where only it's rocks growing.
Right. Well, and we had, what was it we had last year with the one about the Earth getting hotter because of the dual nuclear.
The day the Earth caught fire. You know what? That actually is not a bad key either, now that you mention it.
Just in the threat of, it's a natural disaster threat that you can't really stop.
Right, exactly. It falls into a category of movies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've got a couple of other 50s ones, which are very similar just for different aspects of it. One is Them. Because remember, in Them, it starts with the little girl that they find, and all she can do is scream.
Yeah, totally. I thought I had that, but I forgot to write it down. You're absolutely right. That whole sequence with her when she's not talking reminds me of Them. Yeah. And
like her, but also similar, is The Blob, because The Blob starts with it getting on the hobo's hand, the vagrant's hand.
Oh, yeah, and it gets on her hand, too.
And it gets on her hand, and we've got to stop it before it grows. Those two were similar keys to me.
I watched it with my sister, and she is a retired nurse. And when they had her in that thing, I was like, what is that thing? And my sister knew immediately. She said, that's an iron lung. I was like, oh, I guess you can't breathe.
Well, that's what it was for. It's almost an early decompression chamber. Help lungs inflate and deflate based on pressure in the chamber. Wow. But yeah, the fact that they could actually get one and use one and had it in there, that's kind of cool science. That's a cool science. Yeah, we also have that in our geology lab.
We have the Department of Interior and high-grade medical equipment in Mayberry.
I do have a link that's similar to Grant, is that the sets that they used for the medical center when they took the girl and everything else, that's the same medical center as they were doing the initial tests in The Incredible Shrinking Man. So that's the same area they shot it in.
You know what? I had that as well. You're right. It is a direct key to The Incredible Shrinking Man because they used the same medical center. It was almost like they were trying to do it in the same universe.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I got that. I got
which
that
is very
feel from
cool.
it.
Yeah, I like that kind of key. I have, well, I have Armageddon because a meteor hits the Earth, basically.
Yes.
But I
Yeah.
also have, and this is my last one, is that actual meteor crash footage was the spaceship crash from It Came from Outer Space.
It came from outer space. Yeah.
So they lifted it and used it in this movie as well.
Yeah. I have another one too that my last two that are similar to another like subgenre or whatever. And I found this when I was doing some research on it, but somebody else mentioned it. So I'm not taking credit for it. The Martian and Arrival. Because there are also two other science fiction stories that depend on science and the discovery of science to be the resolution. The ending depends on science. For her, it was the science of translation and understanding time and all of that in Arrival. And The Martian, he says it from the very beginning, I'm going to science the shit out of this kind
Yeah,
of thing.
right. I'm
But
going to grow
resolution
potatoes.
depends on science and not on action or explosions or some hero doing something incredible that nobody else can do. It's all science based because they
Mhm.
basically figure out, oh, well, let's just douse these things in salt like a slug. Let's stop them. So, yeah, that was my last two keys.
Yeah, the only thing that I find, I mean, obviously it's preposterous because it's a 50s sci-fi movie. But the one thing that I found really the most preposterous, I think, is that not only do they find that salt or saline will destroy the rocks themselves, but they
Mm-hmm.
also find a medical cure for the people that are turning to stone, and it's silicon.
Yeah,
It's like a silicon
basically.
solution that he
Yeah.
injects into that girl, and she gets better, and then they realize, oh, we can reverse this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because apparently, for those of you out there that have never seen this movie, the reason they're turning to stone is the rocks are somehow absorbing the silicon from their bodies. And the
Yes.
silicons are what give us malleability or something. I don't know. It's 50 sci-fi, so your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah.
But so silicon and saline are our friends. That's what this movie's telling us, David.
It is. And I also have in my last trivia that Universal Pictures released this film on a double feature with Love Slaves of the Amazon,
Well,
which makes perfect sense.
I would hope this was the first picture and not the second one because
What,
the second one sounds horrible.
what an adequate companion to this piece.
Yeah,
Love
I mean,
Slaves of
go
the
from
Amazon.
the
Yeah.
desert sci-fi to Amazon soft
Jungle
porn.
Love. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, Jungle Love. Yeah.
jungle love.
But it was
All
fun. I'm
right.
really glad we finally got to do it. Again, I like I said, I think I've mentioned this from when we were first compiling the list the first year of movies that we could cover. I think Monolith Monsters came on mine. Just because I remember it from Shock Theater. I saw it over and over again. That Creature from the Black
I
Lagoon,
don't
I
know
always
how I
remember.
missed it.
Yeah. I
I
saw it several
never
times.
saw it, but I love when we do these old sci-fis anyway, especially the 50s monster type movies,
Hmm.
because regardless of how ridiculous they are, I still enjoy them.
Yes,
I mean, I
I
would
do
watch
too.
this again before I would watch Buckaroo Banzai. I will use that one for a long time.
Yes,
And I
I
did
know.
watch this twice.
There you go.
So
No.
there you go. And folks, there you go. That's what
Hmm.
we do here. We talk about these movies, whether they are high on people's list or not, because we enjoy them. And we are glad
We
that
do.
you joined us today. If you like what you heard, we would appreciate any comments, likes, or ratings that you can give us either on YouTube or the podcast platform that you listen to us on. That is always greatly appreciated. And if you really like us and want to help support us, we do have a Patreon page where we have extra stuff. Some of it's free, some of it's tiered as far as contributions, and we are always looking for some support, believe me. And we have some other shows over there as well with those tiers, including a show on the original Star Trek series, episode by episode, and the X-Files, episode by episode. So you
Hmm.
can always join us over there. And until next week, when I think we're in the scary place again.
We're going to go to the dark side.
It's not real scary, but it is Stephen King. I'll give you all that hint. How about that?
There you go. Yeah.
All right. I'll see you then.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.